Hi gentlemen, these will be your notes from Unit 1, Day 3. So again, if you want to see the completed warm-up review question or any of the homework problems we went through in class, just look at the finish notes, which are directly above the video notes in your module. Today we're going to talk about adding and subtracting real numbers. So if you remember from our first day from Unit 1, real numbers were any number that you can think about. So decimals, fractions, square roots, irrational numbers like pi. We're going to learn how to add and subtract them. And we're going to be able to evaluate algebraic expressions and solve problems that involve operations on real numbers. Okay, so adding numbers. You guys are really good at just adding basic ones like 4 plus 2, but another way of thinking about these, especially when you can get confused about negatives and positives and adding and subtracting them, is you can think about it as movement on a number line. We're going to start at 4, and when we're adding a number, we're going to move to the right because we're getting bigger. So if we're going to do 4 plus 2, we're going to start at 4, and then we're going to move 2 to the right. So this would be adding 2, and we would end up at 6. So 4 plus 2, if we were moving on a number line, would be 6. If we wanted to do, let's go down to that bottom one, negative 5 plus 9, we're going to start at negative 5, and then we are going to move 9 to the right. So we're going to start at negative 5, which is right here, and then we're going to move 9 to the right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which makes sense because if you're starting at negative 5 and you want to get to 0, you would move 5. And then we need to move 4 more. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and we moved 9 to the right. So negative 5 plus 9 is we're going to end at 4. If we want to do negative 3 plus negative 5, so when you're multiplying a positive and a negative, you guys might remember it's just going to be a negative. So this is going to be negative 3 minus 5. And so we are subtracting, actually. And so when you subtract, you move to the left. Or if you're adding negatives, you're becoming smaller. You're moving to the left. So if you're adding negatives, you're going to move to the left. So we're going to start at negative 3, and we are subtracting 5, or we're adding negative 5. So we're going to move 5 to the left. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we would end up at negative 8. So this is negative 3 plus negative 5 is going to give me negative 8. Another way you can think about adding and subtracting positives and negatives, if you guys like the sports analogy, you can think of this as team positive versus team negative. So who scored the most points? So in our first example, team positive 4, team positive 2. Both 4 and 2 are positive. So team positive scored a total of 6 points. In the second example, team negative scored 3 points. Team negative scored 5 points because both the 3 and the 5 are negative. So team negative has a total of 8 points. In that third example, we have 2 teams. Team negative scored 5 points. Team positive scored 9 points. So team positive won by 4 points. So that's another way you can think about that problem. So let's do a couple more examples. So if we did 3 plus negative 9, remember we're adding negatives. So when we're adding negatives, we're adding negative 9. We're going to move to the left on the number line. So we're going to start at 3 and add negative 9. So I'm going to move 3, and then I'm going to have to move 6 more. And so 3 plus negative 9 is going to be negative 6. Or you can think of it as team positive and team negative. Team positive scored 3 points. Team negative scored 9 points. So team negative won by 6 points. All right, you guys try the following 2, and you can check them against your finished notes. Adding real numbers, you guys can try A. For the other 2, 12.6 plus negative 6.7. You can think of this as team positive and team negative, but that's a little bit harder. But remember, a positive times a negative is a negative. So this is the same thing as 12.6 minus 6.7. So 12.6 minus 6.7, and we can just subtract. So we're going to make it 1, 16, so this would be 9. So this is going to be 5.9. What if it was the other way? What if it was positive 6.7 minus 12.6? Well, the good news is you can still subtract them the same way, right? Because if we want to know who won the game, and we would still get 5.9. But notice this time, team negative won the game, so it's going to be negative 5.9 if you did 6.7 minus 12.6. Fractions work the same way, but remember we need a common denominator. So negative 2/5 plus 3/4, we need a common denominator, so it would be 20. So times by 4 times by 4 times by 5 times by 5. And this is going to be negative 8 over 20 plus 15 over 20. And then remember, when you're adding, add the numerators. So negative 8 plus 15. Team negative scored 8 points. Team positive scored 15 points. So team positive won by 7. And then the denominator stays the same when you're adding and subtracting fractions. So that'll be 7 over 20. All right, so you guys go ahead and try this page. You guys can check it against the finished notes. Opposites, or the fancier way of saying it, is additive inverses. So opposites you guys should know, like 3 and negative 3 are opposites. 1/2 and negative 1/2 are opposites. So it's the positive and negative version of the same number. X and negative x are opposites. 5y and negative 5y are opposites. What happens when you add opposites? What's 3 plus negative 3? Well, team positive scored 3 points, team negative scored 3 points, so it ends in a tie. Nobody won. So an opposite plus its opposite is equal to 0, or additive inverses add up to 0. So negative x plus positive x would also be 0 because they're opposites. So opposites add up to 0. So let's talk about these. So when you see a negative sign out in front of a number, you can also, instead of reading it as a negative, you can read it as the opposite of. So you can read this as the opposite of, and then what's in parentheses, negative 7. So what's the opposite of negative 7? It would be positive 7. So you guys go ahead and try the next two. Subtracting integers on a number line. So again, when you're subtracting, you can move to the left. So 4 minus 2, we could start at 4. And then if we subtract 2, we're going to move 2 over. So 4 minus 2 is 2. 3 minus 5, we would start at 3 and we would subtract 5. So we move 3 and then 2 more. So 3 minus 5 is going to be negative 2. Negative 5 minus 4, so we're going to start at negative 5 and then move 4 over to the left. And so negative 5 minus 4 is going to be negative 9. Now where things get fun is, what does it mean if you're going to do 3 minus the opposite of 4? What happens when we looked up above, when it was 3 minus the opposite of 4, or we had the opposite of negative 7? It became a positive 7. So you can add a line and change the sign. Some of you guys might have learned about that. Or another way of thinking about it is we're subtracting negatives. If you're getting rid of negatives, that makes your number more positive. So this is the same thing as just 3 plus 4. So when you subtract negatives, you're actually adding. So subtracting negatives is the same thing as adding. So 3 minus negative 4 is the same thing as 3 plus 4, which would be 7. Okay. So again, I mentioned the phrase add a line and change the sign. So if you like to add better than subtract, on every single one of these problems, you can change it into an addition problem and then make the number after it the opposite sign. So that would be 4 plus negative 2, or 3 plus negative 5, or negative 5 plus negative 4, or 3 plus positive 4. And then you can make it into a team positive, team negative game. So team positive scored 4, team negative scored 2, so team positive won by 2. Or team positive scored 3, team negative scored 5, so team negative won by negative 2. So those are a couple different ways to think about subtracting integers. So you guys go ahead and try these, and then you can check your answers against the finished notes. Subtracting real numbers. So this would work the same way. Remember, if it's 6.4 minus negative 5.7, you're subtracting negatives, so that's the same thing as adding. So it'll be 6.4 plus 5.7. So you guys can try that. Negative 5 over 6 minus 2 over 3. So we need a common denominator, so we can multiply by 2 and multiply by 2. So this is going to be negative 5 over 6 minus 4 over 6. And however you want to think about it, we can add a line and change the sign. So it'll be negative 5 over 6 plus negative 4 over 6, which would end up being negative 9 over 6. You can reduce that into negative 3 over 2. So you guys go ahead and try C. So if we're going to combine adding and subtracting, we've got to follow the order of operations. So on the first one, all you have is subtraction and addition. So we're going to start on the left and work all the way over because addition and subtraction are both step 4 in the order of operations. So we're just going to go from left to right. So negative 22 minus 8, we're going to move to the left on the number line, or you can think of it as negative 22 plus negative 8, and that would be negative 30. So now I have negative 30 plus 12 minus negative 5. And so, again, moving from left to right, now I have negative 30 plus 12. So team negative scored 30 points. Team positive scored 12 points. So I have negative 18. And then minus negative 5. Remember, when you're subtracting negatives, you're actually adding. So that would be negative 15 plus 5, which would be negative 13. B, make sure you follow the order of operations so you guys can try that. C, let's go ahead and try this one together. So we have parentheses. Brackets are the same as parentheses. So we've got to do inside of those first. So 3 minus negative 5, we're subtracting negatives, so that's the same thing as adding. So this is going to be 3 plus 5, and 3 plus 5 is 8. Now we're going to do exponents next, and 4 to the second power is 16. So now I have the absolute value of negative 12 minus 16 plus 8. The absolute value of negative 12 is 12. So now I have 12 minus 16 plus 8. And now order of operations say we're going to go in order from left to right because it's just subtraction and addition left. So this is going to be 12 minus 16. So team positive 12, team negative 16. So team negative 1 by 4. So it's going to be negative 4 plus 8. And then we're going to have 4 left because negative 4 plus 8 will be 4. All right, evaluating algebraic expressions. We did this last class. So your first step, remember, is to plug in. And when you plug in, put in parentheses. So x minus y, this is going to be 5 minus negative 3 over 5 plus y. So this would be 5 plus negative 3. In the numerator, we're subtracting a negative, so we're really adding. So this is going to be 5 plus 3 over 5 plus negative 3. So this is going to be 8 over 2, which is 4. Okay. B, make sure you put it in parentheses when you plug in. So it's going to be negative 3 squared minus 4 times 5. Negative 3 squared means negative 3 times negative 3. A negative times a negative is a positive. We're probably going to review that next class. So this is going to be 9 minus 20, which would give me negative 11. So some key vocab that you guys may have learned previously if you took a little bit of geometry in middle school is complementary and supplementary angles. Complementary angles are two angles that add up to 90 degrees. So if we had one angle is 38 degrees, what would that other angle have to be so that they would add up to 98? So 38 plus what would equal 90? How would we figure that out? Well, 90 minus 38 would give us that angle that we would need. And that guy would be 52, because 52 plus 38 would make 90. Supplementary angles are two angles that add up to 180 degrees, or they also form a straight line. And complementary angles form that 90-degree angle like the corner of a box. So if one angle is 52 and I want to find the other one, then y plus 52 is going to be 180. So to figure out what that missing angle is, I can take 180 minus 52, which would give me 148. Nope, 128. So 128 degrees would be my missing angle in that example. So again, your homework's going to be 1.5 and 1.6. Choose 2 problems from each of the number groupings in each